Welcome to Darkness Narrator. To understand what happened in Rio de Janeiro during the deadliest police operation in recent years, we must first understand the territory and the structure that sustains it. Brazil is a vast country, marked by enormous social, economic, and territorial disparities. In some urban regions, especially in Rio, the state either shares or competes for control with heavily armed criminal organizations. These are not improvised groups. They have hierarchies, command chains, communication systems, funding, and access to military-grade rifles. They operate as parallel structures of authority. The Alemão and Penha complexes in Rio's northern zone are densely populated areas. Large blocks of houses stacked one over another, narrow alleys, endless staircases, and rooftops connected like a vertical maze. It's a territory built upward, a place where surveillance comes from above and movement doesn't depend only on the streets. For years, different criminal factions have established lookout points, internal routes, and territorial control throughout these complexes. The police go in, but rarely stay. The operation we'll examine here was presented by the government as an action to dismantle organized crime structures, a mission to recover state control over areas where its presence had been severely limited. The result was devastating. The numbers changed depending on who you asked, and so did the versions of the story. What remained afterward wasn't just silence, but a series of questions that are still unanswered. This is the story of what happened after the gunfire stopped, when the reconstruction of the events began. To understand the operation, we have to begin before the day of the confrontation. Rio de Janeiro is not a homogeneous city. It's a place of contrasts. Luxury tourist zones by the ocean coexist with regions where the state does not fully control the territory. In those areas, control is disputed. This is not about petty crime or random violence. These are organized structures with internal discipline, financial systems, and military capacity. The Alemão and Penha complexes are made up of hillside communities, houses stacked on top of one another, rooftops connected, narrow alleys where two people can barely walk side by side. For an outsider, it might seem like a horizontal labyrinth. In reality, movement is vertical, from the street to the rooftop, from one rooftop to another, up a staircase to an observation post. Territorial control here isn't measured only by presence on the ground, but by who dominates the heights. Over the years, organized groups have consolidated themselves in these territories. They didn't form overnight. It took time, resources, and alliances. They managed drug sales, internal transport, supply distribution, and local taxation. They handle money, unreported, circulating, liquid cash. That economic flow sustains the weapons, and the weapons sustain control. It's not just about violence, it's about economy and territorial administration. The rifles circulating in these territories aren't cheap. A gun that costs less than $1,000 elsewhere might cost between 80 and 200,000 Rs here. The price reflects the cost of smuggling, clandestine routes, and the risk taken by each intermediary. Every rifle represents an investment, each weapon a symbol of authority. Fighting organized crime in Rio, therefore, is not just about arrests. It's about dismantling supply chains, breaking communication routes, and interrupting economic circulation systems. The state's presence in these areas has always been intermittent. The police enter, but rarely stay. Rapid operations can disrupt activities, but seldom dismantle entire structures. That's why, when the large-scale operation in Alemão and Penha was announced, the declared goal wasn't only to arrest individuals, but to restore the state's capacity to decide what happens within these borders. But the territory doesn't react passively. In places where control is consolidated, lookouts stationed on high points monitor entrances, exits, and movements. Internal routes allow mobility without touching the streets. There are visible and invisible codes everywhere. That's why a large-scale police operation requires detailed planning. Multiple access fronts, armored vehicles for protection, aerial support for reconnaissance, and specialized teams trained for combat in vertical urban environments. The operation was officially announced as an effort to fight organized crime and reclaim areas where the state's presence was weak. The action was carried out with a massive number of agents, armored vehicles, helicopters, and surveillance drones. The goal was to seize the high points first, to block movement, cut internal routes, and ultimately secure control of the terrain. But even before the first shot was fired, the operation had already changed the territory. In places like these, information spreads fast. Warning messages, visual signals, the closing of shops and homes. When the helicopter lights start to appear, when the armored vehicles take position, the entire territory adjusts instantly. No one needs an explanation. Everyone knows what's coming. The relationship between the state and these zones is not simple. It's not a straight line between control and chaos. It's a fragile balance where each side constantly watches the other. When an operation breaks that balance, what's at stake is not only security, it's the social, economic, and territorial structure of an entire community. That was the prelude. The operation didn't start with the gunfire, it started with the decision to enter. The dawn was grey when the armored vehicles began to move. Helicopters hovered above the hills, their rotors cutting through the humid air. From the ground, the sound was unmistakable. Heavy engines, metal grinding against concrete, and the slow advance of a column of vehicles through narrow, uneven streets. In the Alemão and Penha complexes, that sound means only one thing: the state has entered. Officially, the operation was a coordinated action between state police and federal support units, with the objective of capturing high-ranking members of organized crime and seizing heavy weaponry. Unofficially, it was a demonstration of force, a message to both the factions and the public that control could still be asserted, even if temporarily. Residents woke up to the echo of gunfire. Social media began to fill with videos, helicopters circling, bursts of automatic rifles, people taking cover behind walls. Shops closed within minutes. Public transportation halted. Schools and clinics suspended activities. The police narrative described an operation based on intelligence reports, planned routes, specific targets, precise coordinates. But in the complexity of Rio's urban labyrinth, precision is an illusion. A single movement can turn the hunter into the hunted. As the first teams advanced through the lower parts of the favela, communication between groups was disrupted. Narrow passages made it impossible for vehicles to proceed. Visibility was reduced. From the rooftops, lookouts observed every step. The confrontation escalated quickly. In the official statements, the operation lasted just a few hours, but for those inside, time seemed to expand endlessly, each gunshot echoing through the walls, each movement met with uncertainty. The numbers that followed were confusing, shifting from one source to another. Authorities spoke of dozens of criminals neutralized. Local organizations, however, reported something different. Residents without criminal records among the dead, houses destroyed, children traumatized, people unable to leave their homes for over 24 hours. When the police finally withdrew, the territory was silent again. The silence of exhaustion. The silence that comes after chaos. Drone footage showed smoke still rising from the hills, bullet holes in walls, burned cars, broken windows. The image was almost cinematic, but behind every frame, there was real loss. For the media, the event became another chapter in Rio's long history of urban warfare. For the residents, it was a reminder that peace, in their reality, is only a pause between operations. And for the state, the operation became a statistic, an official victory against organized crime. But numbers don't show what stays behind. They don't show the fear of leaving home the next day. They don't show the mothers searching for their sons at the morgue. They don't show the children who learned to distinguish gun calibers by sound. In the aftermath, investigations were opened, none of them conclusive. Public officials justified the operation as necessary. Human rights groups called it a massacre. Between those two narratives lies the truth, fragmented, blurred, buried under layers of bureaucracy and silence. Because in Rio, every bullet has two targets, the one it hits and the story it erases. When the last armored vehicle left the hill, the city returned to its usual rhythm. The traffic resumed, the sirens faded, and life continued, at least for those who could. But inside the Alemão and Penha complexes, the echoes remained. Walls filled with bullet holes became silent witnesses. Streets were left covered in shattered glass and debris. And amid that silence, the question lingered: what was really achieved? Officially, the operation was a success. Weapons were seized, suspects were neutralized. But for the people who lived there, it was another reminder that the line between protection and invasion is often invisible. In the days that followed, families buried their dead, some without knowing exactly how or why they were killed. Residents described how the shooting started before dawn, how they tried to hide under beds or behind brick walls, how stray bullets pierced thin roofs. Community organizations attempted to count the victims, but numbers varied. In places like these, certainty dies quickly. Journalists arrived later when the smoke had cleared. The stories they told depended on where they stood. From the outside, it looked like a necessary battle. From the inside, it felt like a punishment. For the state, the operation was part of a strategy, a demonstration of power. For the factions, it was a temporary setback, not a defeat. And for the residents, it was another cycle, a repetition of a violence so constant that it becomes predictable. What remains after an operation like this isn't just destruction, it's distrust. It's about a system that arrives armed but never stays to rebuild. And perhaps that's the real darkness behind these stories. Not just the gunfire, not the chaos, but the silence that follows. A silence that says, nothing has changed. Between the people and the police, between the residents and the media, between the territory and the state that claims to govern it. Every confrontation deepens the distance between these worlds, the asphalt and the hill, the governed and the forgotten. And in that distance, organized crime grows again, feeding on the same absence that the state never managed to fill. Months later, new reports emerged, new weapons in circulation, new leaders taking control. The cycle had restarted. The success of the operation had lasted only as long as the headlines. In Rio de Janeiro, violence doesn't end. It shifts, it transforms, adapts, and waits. Because in territories where the law is temporary and justice is selective, the only constant is survival. The story of the Alemão and Penha operation isn't an isolated event. It's a reflection of a deeper problem, one that cannot be solved by force alone. It's about the absence of education, healthcare, opportunity, and presence. Because in the end, the question is not who won the battle. The question is who will still be there when the next one begins.